He didn't lower his voice, not even with his brother standing in the doorway. "Sign the papers or get out." The settlement packet slapped against the kitchen counter. The sound echoed against the tile floors I chose. The chandelier above us hummed faintly, the same one I installed after my promotion bonus cleared. I could smell the coffee I brewed that morning. Still warm. Still mine. "This is my house now," he added casually, waving the folder in the air like he was presenting a trophy. His brother looked away. I didn't argue. I didn't cry. I picked up the pen, and I smiled. When we bought the house, my name was the only one on the pre-approval letter. Daniel liked to tell people it was our place. But the bank statements told a quieter story. I worked in finance. Long hours, clean contracts, careful numbers. I was 35 when I qualified for the mortgage alone. He was between ventures. That's how he described it. "Once my startup takes off, we'll refinance," he used to say, standing in the empty living room while sunlight poured across the hardwood floors I paid for. I believed him. Or maybe I believed in momentum. In marriage as a shared climb. At first, he was supportive. Proud, even. He told friends, "She's the smart one." It sounded affectionate. But slowly, something shifted. He began introducing the house differently. "My property," he'd say jokingly. The first time, I laughed. The 10th time, I noticed. Have you ever watched a joke slowly turn into a rehearsal? The mortgage came out of my account every month. Property taxes, too. Insurance. Repairs. The new water heater when it failed midwinter. Daniel handled aesthetics, throw pillows, a sound system, hosting friends. He liked to stand in the kitchen during gatherings and gesture around proudly. "Hard work pays off," he'd say. People assumed he meant himself. I let it go. Convenience is quiet at first. It feels harmless. When his business idea stalled, he stopped mentioning timelines. He stayed home more, slept later, became sensitive about finances. "If you loved me, you wouldn't keep score," he once said when I asked about contributing to utilities. "Keep score." I stopped asking. It seemed easier than conflict. My routine stayed the same. Up at 6. Coffee. Laptop open before sunrise. Meetings stacked back to back. I carried the house in numbers and deadlines while he carried it in narrative. Then came small changes. He started meeting with a financial advisor I had never met. He asked for copies of our tax returns. "Just organizing things," he said casually. Organizing. I didn't think much of it, until I noticed something else. He had begun correcting people when they complimented my promotion. "She works hard," he'd say, smiling tightly. "But we both built this life." Both. The word landed differently each time. I wasn't looking for credit, but I was starting to see erasure. How long can someone blur ownership before they convince themselves it belongs to them? The first time he mentioned divorce, it wasn't emotional. It was strategic. The first time he said the word divorce, he did it gently, almost thoughtfully. We were sitting at the dining table on a Sunday evening. The dishwasher hummed in the background. I was reviewing a quarterly report on my laptop while he scrolled through something on his phone. "You ever think about what would happen if this didn't work out?" he asked casually. I didn't look up at first. "Marriage?" I said. "Yeah," he replied. "Just hypothetically." Hypothetically. I closed the laptop slowly. "Why are you asking?" I said. He shrugged. "Just being practical. You never know." Practical. The same word he once used to describe prenuptial agreements. Unnecessary if you trust each other. At the time, I laughed it off. Every couple has uncomfortable conversations. Maybe he was just anxious. Maybe I was overreading it. Have you ever convinced yourself that a warning sign is just overthinking? The small things kept stacking. He started asking detailed questions about the mortgage structure. "Is it fixed rate? What happens if someone leaves the property? Would the house have to be sold?" He framed them like curiosity. I answered them like transparency. One evening, I found a folder in his desk drawer labeled Asset Review. Inside were printed copies of my pay stubs, my investment summaries, the home appraisal from last year. My name was highlighted in yellow across several pages. I stood there for a long moment, holding the folder. When I asked about it later, he didn't flinch. "I'm just protecting myself," he said. "You make more money. If anything ever happened, I'd be at a disadvantage." Disadvantage. The house was in my name, the loan in my name, the down payment from my account. And yet somehow, he felt vulnerable. That night, I lay awake listening to the hum of the air conditioner. The house felt different. Less like a shared space, more like a contested one. A week later, he mentioned refinancing again. "Maybe we should restructure ownership," he said lightly. "Put both names on everything." Everything. "Why now?" I asked. He didn't answer directly. "Marriage is partnership," he said instead. Partnership. But partnership had slowly started to feel like negotiation. I didn't argue. I didn't accuse. I just began saving copies of documents. Quietly. Have you ever felt something shifting long before you could prove it? Because by the time he waved that settlement across the kitchen counter, I already knew this wasn't impulsive. It was prepared. The final shift didn't happen overnight. It unfolded in tone, in posture, in the way he started speaking to me like I was an obstacle instead of a partner. He began working late again, though there was no visible business. Phone calls in the garage, quiet conversations that stopped when I entered the room. One evening, I walked past his office and heard him say, "She won't fight it. She hates conflict." I paused in the hallway. He was right. I did hate conflict, but not because I was weak, because I valued stability. Later that week, he left a document open on the kitchen island, a draft settlement agreement. I stood there staring at my own address printed under the phrase, "marital residence." Under his column, it read, "Full occupancy rights pending asset division." Pending. As if division were inevitable. When I asked him directly, he didn't deny it. "It's better to be ahead of things," he said calmly. "You're emotional about the house. I'm just thinking long term." Emotional. The word felt rehearsed. "I paid for it," I said quietly. "And we lived in it," he replied. As if proximity equaled ownership. Have you ever noticed how someone can slowly rewrite a story while you're still living inside it? The paperwork wasn't spontaneous. It was strategic. He had consulted a lawyer, drafted terms, structured timelines, all without a conversation. And yet, in public, he still played the role of supportive husband. At a dinner with friends, he placed his hand on my back and said, "We've built something solid." Built. The word echoed differently now. That night, as I loaded the dishwasher alone, I felt something settle inside me. Not panic, not heartbreak. Recognition. This wasn't about love fading. It was about control consolidating. And the settlement packet he would later wave in my face was simply the final performance. After I saw the draft settlement, something inside me went quiet. Not defeated, just observant. I stopped arguing over small things, stopped correcting him when he introduced the house as ours in front of guests. I began listening more than speaking. It's strange how clarity changes your posture. The kitchen felt different after that. The granite counters I chose, the pendant lights I negotiated for, the hardwood floors I paid extra to upgrade. Every corner carried receipts in my memory, but I stopped defending them. Instead, I began gathering. Copies of mortgage statements, proof of down payment transfers, renovation invoices in my email. Not aggressively, not dramatically, just organized. Have you ever realized you don't need to win an argument? You just need to understand the facts? Daniel became more confident in tone. He started using phrases like asset redistribution and equitable split. He said them casually, as if discussing groceries. One evening, he placed the final draft on the dining table. "This is fair," he said. "You keep your investments. I keep the house." The house, as if it were a souvenir from a shared trip. "I paid for it," I said again. And I maintained it. He replied calmly. Maintained. He meant he hosted friends. He meant he mowed the lawn occasionally. He meant he existed inside it. The part that surprised me wasn't his demand. It was his certainty. He believed I would resist emotionally. He believed I would argue. He believed I would beg to stay. But the truth was, something had shifted weeks earlier. The night I heard him say, "She won't fight it." He thought I avoided conflict. What he didn't understand was that I avoided noise. There's a difference. The morning of the confrontation, the house was unusually quiet. No music, no television. Just the low hum of the refrigerator and the faint ticking of the wall clock. He stood in the kitchen with the folder in his hand. "Sign the papers or get out," he said. His brother leaned against the doorway, watching. Daniel waved the settlement like it was already decided. He expected tears. He expected hesitation. Instead, I picked up the pen. And I signed. Not because I surrendered, but because I had already made a call he didn't know about. The pen moved easily. No shaking, no dramatic pause. Just ink on paper. Daniel watched closely, waiting for a reaction that never came. His brother shifted uncomfortably near the doorway. "That was smart," Daniel said, almost amused. "You're finally being reasonable." Reasonable. I slid the signed pages back across the counter. "When do I leave?" I asked calmly. He blinked. "Tonight would be easiest," he replied. "I'll have the locks changed tomorrow." Easiest. The word felt almost thoughtful. I walked upstairs quietly and opened the closet. I didn't take much. A suitcase, a few clothes, my laptop, a small box of personal documents I had already separated weeks ago. The house was silent except for the sound of zippers and footsteps on hardwood. Have you ever noticed how loud a home feels when it stops feeling like yours? Before leaving, I stood in the living room for a moment. The sofa I purchased, the framed photos I chose, the window treatments I paid extra for. Daniel didn't follow me upstairs. He didn't offer help. He didn't look concerned. He thought he had won. At the door, he said something almost casual. "You'll thank me later. You're too attached to this place." Attached. I looked at him steadily. "I'm not attached," I said. "I'm aware." He didn't understand the difference. I walked out with one suitcase and my car keys. No shouting, no threats, just departure. 10 hours later, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. When I answered, a man's voice exploded through the line. "Do you know what you just signed?" It was Daniel's lawyer, and he didn't sound pleased. The lawyer didn't greet me. He didn't introduce himself again. "Why didn't you disclose the secondary filing?" he demanded. I leaned back in the driver's seat of my car. I hadn't driven far. Just to a quiet hotel near my office. The lobby still smelled faintly of lemon polish when I checked in. "What filing?" I asked calmly. A pause. Then paper rustling. "The pre-existing property protection agreement," he said sharply. "The one recorded 3 weeks ago." Recorded. 3 weeks ago. Yes, that call. The one Daniel didn't know about. "I assumed you reviewed all public filings before drafting the settlement," I replied evenly. Silence. Heavy. Then a muttered word under his breath. "You transferred protective ownership to a holding entity," he continued, voice tightening. "The house isn't personally assignable anymore." Assignable. "That's correct," I said. 3 weeks earlier, after finding the draft settlement, I had consulted my own attorney. Not for revenge, for structure. We had created a simple legal entity tied to my premarital assets and documented funding source. It was clean, transparent, recorded properly. Daniel never checked. He assumed. Have you ever noticed how confidence can blur due diligence? "You signed over occupancy rights," the lawyer continued, "but not the controlling interest." "I signed exactly what was presented," I replied. Another pause. Longer this time. "Your husband believes he owns the house," he said flatly. I didn't respond, because ownership isn't declared, it's documented. The lawyer exhaled sharply. This complicates everything, he muttered. Complicates. No, clarifies. I suggest you review the full property structure before advising him further, I said gently. Then I ended the call. I sat there in the quiet car, listening to the faint hum of traffic outside. 10 hours earlier, Daniel thought he had forced me out. Now he was discovering that paperwork isn't performance, it's precision, and precision doesn't shout. It records. Daniel called me at 2:14 a.m. I didn't answer. The phone vibrated again at 2:17. Then 2:19. Finally, a voicemail. Why didn't you tell me? He demanded, his voice stripped of confidence. What is this entity filing? The lawyer says the house isn't transferable. Transferable. I lay back against the hotel pillows and stared at the ceiling. The room was quiet. Neutral. Temporary. He sounded different. Not angry. Uncertain. By morning, he had called 7 times. I waited until 9 a.m. to return the call. Explain this, he said immediately when I answered. No greeting. There's nothing to explain, I replied calmly. The property was secured using premarital funds. The legal structure protects it. You signed the settlement, he snapped. Yes, I said. The one your lawyer drafted. Silence. Then the shift. You tricked me. Tricked. Have you ever noticed how preparation looks like deception to someone who didn't prepare? I protected myself, I said evenly. You were doing the same. You walked away, he said, almost accusingly. Yes, I replied. He exhaled sharply. The lawyer says I can't sell it. I can't refinance it. I can't even leverage it without your entity's consent. Consent. The word felt familiar. It had been missing from his process. You assumed I was emotional, I said quietly. I was organized. He didn't respond immediately. In the background, I could hear the faint echo of our kitchen, the space he thought he controlled. This makes me look foolish, he muttered. I closed my eyes briefly. That was never my goal. And it wasn't. I didn't want humiliation. I wanted clarity. The house was legally tied to a holding structure funded before our marriage. He had rights to temporary occupancy under the settlement he drafted, but he had no authority to liquidate or claim controlling ownership. He hadn't read beyond the surface. Confidence replaced diligence. That was his mistake. Around noon, his lawyer called again, this time measured. We'll need to renegotiate, he said. There's nothing to renegotiate, I replied. You drafted a document under incorrect assumptions. You could have disclosed, he added. Everything was publicly recorded, I said calmly. Another pause. You understand this damages trust, he said. Trust. The word lingered. Trust had been the first thing he leveraged against me. You prepared for divorce before discussing it, I replied. You called that practicality. The lawyer had no answer. By afternoon, Daniel texted instead of calling. We need to talk in person. I declined. There was nothing left to clarify face to face. The following week, he moved out. Yes, he moved out. Because occupancy rights don't override control. He couldn't restructure the mortgage, couldn't refinance, couldn't convert it into capital. The legal limitations made the house less useful to him than he expected. Without leverage, it became inconvenient. I didn't rush back. I didn't demand keys. I let the paperwork unfold quietly. Eventually, his lawyer requested formal termination of occupancy under the entities clause. Clean, structured, civil, no screaming, no public spectacle. Just correction. Have you ever noticed how the loudest threats collapse under quiet documentation? 3 months later, I walked back into the house. Not triumphantly, not emotionally, just calmly. The air smelled faintly stale. Dust settled on the windowsills, The hardwood floors reflected afternoon light the same way they always had. Nothing about the structure changed, only the clarity inside it. I stood in the living room and felt something unexpected. Not victory, relief. The house was never the real issue. It was the assumption. The belief that I would panic. The belief that I would beg. The belief that my attachment was weakness. But attachment isn't weakness. Blind trust is. I sold the house 6 months later. Not because I lost it, because I outgrew it. The sale was straightforward, profitable, clean. I moved into a smaller place near my office. Brighter windows, less square footage, more peace. Daniel tried reaching out once more. A short message. We didn't have to end like this. Maybe not. But some endings aren't explosions. They're exposures. He thought throwing me out would break me. He thought waiving a settlement would intimidate me. Instead, it clarified everything. If this story resonates, share your thoughts below. Sometimes strength isn't loud. It's structured. I didn't fight. I didn't shout. I signed. I walked away. And I let documentation speak. What would you have done? Comment below.